"Enough of this madness," shouted Pasha with a voice that echoed through all the temple courts. "This man is a traitor to the nation and a blasphemer against the temple of the Most High. I will not allow him to continue sowing panic among the people with his prophecies of destruction." Without further delay and using his religious authority, Pasha ordered that they immediately seize Jeremiah. The temple guards, accustomed to obeying the orders of the chief inspector, threw themselves upon the prophet without hesitation. They violently threw him to the ground of the court and began to beat him mercilessly, administering the official flogging prescribed by law: 39 lashes, one less than the 40 prescribed to avoid accidental death of the punished. Each lash fell upon the prophet's back with brutal force, tearing groans of pain that mixed with the jeers of the spectators.
I'm your host, Paul Johnson, and this is Get Some. One story every week. Stories that go where they want, we just follow. If you're here for stories that connect, you're in the right place. Our series title is Choosing the Unknown, and today's episode is the Epilogue, the final chapter in our special series on the Cocodona 250. It's a 250-mile foot race across Arizona, from the desert floor near Phoenix to the high mountains of Flagstaff. We've covered the race from start to finish. Now, we're closing with one last story, a story about what stays after the running is done. Okay, let's get into it. At the 2025 Cocodona 250, 293 runners stood at the starting line. By the time the finish line banners came down in Flagstaff, 100 of them had not made it. They dropped for all the usual reasons: injury, dehydration, time cutoffs. Many dropped because something inside gave out. There's a moment in every 200-mile race when the runner begins to come undone. Not just physically, though the feet are shredded, the joints are inflamed, and the stomach is long past cooperation. No, what breaks isn't the body, it's the belief that this is still worth doing. You'll see it at mile 190, or 210, or 240. A look, a hesitation, a silence that says, maybe I don't need to finish this after all. And in that moment, the right pacer makes all the difference. And that's when a certain kind of person steps forward, the one who's been walking beside them, not leading, not chasing, just staying. They're called pacers. But the good ones don't just set a pace. They anchor the soul. Only miles walked in the shadow of someone else's suffering. And sometimes they don't just pace, they stay. At Cocodona, sometime in the middle of the night, a runner came into Dead Horse Ranch aid station, mile 135. He was well ahead of the cutoff, still in the race, but something was wrong. His crew wasn't there. They were supposed to be, but a flat tire had left them stranded miles away. And in that moment, alone, exhausted, emotionally cracked wide open, the runner sat down. He was done, not injured, just empty. He handed his spot tracker to his pacer. At Cocodona, every runner wears a GPS spot tracker, a small device fastened to their running vest. Race officials use it to track location, verify checkpoint times, and ensure safety. Spectators follow the progress online. Crews use it to time their meetups. And when a runner is done, whether they drop at an aid station or step off the trail, that tracker is surrendered. Turning it in is the universal signal, I'm out. Turn this in. I'm done. The pacer took the tracker, looked at it, then looked at the runner. Are you sure? Yes, I can't go on. Okay, lay down, get some sleep, just rest. No arguing, no convincing, just a blanket, a mat, and 2 hours of silence. Sometime before dawn, the runner woke up. His body felt better, his mind clearer. Something had shifted. The sleep had worked. I think I can go on. But it doesn't matter. You already turned in the tracker. What a mistake. What was I thinking? The pacer held it up. No, I didn't. I held on to it, just in case. The runner stared at him. No words, just quiet recognition. Then he reached out, took the tracker, clipped it back on, and they left Dead Horse Ranch together, running into the sunrise, and he would finish the race. There's no medal for a pacer, no buckle, no podium, but sometimes the most decisive moment in a 250-mile race comes down to one simple act. He didn't turn it in. That was part one, the Cocodona Pacer, a story about the ones who stay, who don't quit when it gets hard, who carry the burden quietly, faithfully, until the finish. Now we turn to another kind of endurance, a different finish line, a different kind of race. Another man stayed, not on the trail, but in a collapsing city, not with a runner, but with a prophet, and not for miles, but for years. This is part two, Jerusalem under siege, and this time the scroll is the tracker, and Baruch is the pacer who stayed. Two men are living under the shadow of a collapsing city. The city smells like ash and boiled water. It's April 3, 586 BC. Jerusalem has been under siege for 18 months. The Babylonian army, disciplined, methodical, has encircled the city like a noose. The armies of King Nebuchadnezzar have surrounded Jerusalem like a tightening fist. Their campfires dot the valley. Their archers wait just beyond bowshot. Outside the walls, hills once green with olive groves are now scorched and gutted. Their siege works rise from the hills, ramps of stone and timber, built slowly, deliberately, to breach the defenses from above. Great mounds of earth and stone rise like twisted roads up to the walls. Wooden towers taller than the parapets roll forward, creaking under their own weight. Archers crouch behind leather shields. Engineers hammer iron-tipped rams into place. Trenches are dug deep, tightening the noose. They didn't charge the gates, they choked them. From the rooftops inside Jerusalem, you can see them working quietly, patiently, closer every day. Inside, food is gone, firewood is gone, hope is rationed. The people whisper of hunger, of children asking for bread, of the day the ramp reaches the gate. The temple still stands, but the priests inside whisper the sacrifices no longer rise. Jerusalem is not under siege by accident. This war has been brewing for years. Judah was once a vassal of Babylon, swearing loyalty, paying tribute, sending grain, gold, and young men to serve in foreign courts. But kings grow restless, especially weak ones. Jehoiakim, appointed by Pharaoh, tolerated by Babylon, defied both. He withheld tribute, whispered of alliances with Egypt, tried to play one empire against another. And now Babylon has come to collect. And it wasn't a sudden invasion. It was a slow tightening. City after city fell. The northern fields burned. Refugees poured in through the gates. And still the king would not yield. So the armies came again. This is not Babylon's first visit, but it may be its last. Near the Benjamin Gate, tucked into the northern ridge just beyond the temple's outer court, a man wakes in a stone room. No glass windows, just wooden slats over an opening in the wall. The light leaks in, pale and dry. His name is Jeremiah ben Hilkiah, once a priest of Anatoth, now a condemned prophet. He moves slowly. He's in his 60s now. His beard is silvered and uncombed. His eyes are dark, set deep, watchful. He wears a coarse wool tunic, cinched with a leather belt worn thin by years of walking. His sandals are cracked, the soles patched with twine. He has no wife, no children. Years ago, God told him, "Do not marry, do not build a home. Your life will be a sign." So he lives alone. Jeremiah, still breathing, still here. Lord, how long? He reheats a half loaf of bread, tears it slowly, chews without tasting. He's waiting, not for a rescue, not for relief. He's waiting for Baruch. Baruch ben Neriah does not knock, not anymore. He times his movements with the guard's rotation, wears a draped wool wrap to hide the scroll case under his arm. His route from the upper city is never the same twice. His family has ties to the king's court. His brother Seraiah still serves there. It's dangerous for him to be seen with Jeremiah. But he comes anyway. Baruch. They're reinforcing the siege ramps near the water gate. The smoke's worse today. Jeremiah. They'll breach by autumn, maybe sooner. Baruch. There are rumors. The priests are debating whether to move the ark. Jeremiah. Too late. It's already gone. They sit together in silence. The room smells of sweat and burnt oil. For years they spoke of judgment as something distant, coming. But now, it's just outside the walls. They can feel it in the stone. Baruch. Should we write it again? Jeremiah. There's nothing left to warn, only to witness. Baruch. Then we write for those who come after. They unroll a fresh scroll. The reed pen is sharpened. The ink pot trembles slightly in Baruch's hand. They do not speak while he writes. Outside, Jerusalem starves. Inside, the last words are being recorded. No one listens to prophets until it's too late. But scribes can still preserve the bones. That was part 2, Jerusalem under siege. 2 men, 1 city, days from collapse. Now we go back, not to the start of the war, but to the start of a partnership, before the scroll, before the warnings, before the walls began to crack. This is part 3, where heaven and earth meet, Jerusalem, 605 BC. The temple still stands, and a young scribe is about to hear a voice that won't let him go. Jerusalem, December. The year is 605 BC, 18 years earlier. Jerusalem stirs early on fast days. The winds haven't turned sharp yet, but the breath of winter is in the air. Pilgrims crowd the gates before dawn, shawls tight around their shoulders, eyes lowered in reverence. Smoke from cook fires rises low and pale. No breakfast is served. The temple is busier than usual, its courtyards filled not with laughter or commerce, but with murmured prayers and restless feet. A national fast has been declared. The city has gathered to seek mercy, though few say for what. The city is old, it is compact, maybe a square mile in all, about the size of Central Park, but dense, layered, walled off from the world and within itself. A stone citadel built on a spine of hills, flanked by steep valleys on three sides. The city is ringed by massive limestone walls breached only by a handful of gates, each with its own flow of traffic and tension. To the north, the Benjamin Gate opens to the road from Anatoth. The Water Gate to the east, each a choke point of trade, temple ritual, and royal surveillance. To the east, the Mount of Olives watches silently across the Kidron Valley. Jerusalem is crowded, cramped. Homes stack atop homes like clay vessels set on shelves. Narrow alleys twist between stone walls, shaded by awnings and smoke darkened from cook fires. At its center, looming over everything, is the temple. Solomon's temple, built nearly 4 centuries earlier under the reign of a king whose name still echoes, Solomon, son of David. White limestone quarried from the hills, cedar beams hauled from Lebanon, gold overlaid on door frames, lampstands, altar. It shines in the morning like fire, and in the evening it glows with reflected oil light from 1,000 lamps. It is enormous for its time, far taller than any home, grander than the palace. Its portico rises above the rooftops like a declaration. The Temple Mount is a walled compound, massive, terraced, layered. The outer courts are open to pilgrims filled with the noise of sacrifice and celebration. Merchants sell salt, oil, flour, doves, required offerings for the rituals. Priests move through the courtyards like clockwork, slaughtering animals, burning incense, chanting psalms. Their white linen robes darken quickly with blood and ash. But beyond the bustle lies the inner court, and at its heart, the sanctuary, the holy place, where only priests may enter. And beyond it, behind a thick, embroidered veil, the Holy of Holies, a small dark chamber that holds the Ark of the Covenant. The chamber is a perfect cube the size of the stage of a small theater, sealed behind the veil. Only one man, once a year, was allowed to step inside. Even he had to purify himself for days, lest he die upon entry. This was where God was said to dwell, tangibly, physically, above the Ark of the Covenant. Yes, that Ark, carved from acacia wood, covered in gold, 2 winged cherubim facing each other on the lid, called the mercy seat. Inside it, the stone tablets of Moses, the 10 Commandments, the covenant, God's contract with Israel. But that was centuries ago. The ark hasn't been seen in generations. No one knows for sure when it vanished. Some say it was hidden before the Babylonians came. Others say it was taken, lost. There are rumors, legends, but in truth, only God knows. No one enters there, only the high priest, and only once a year, Yom Kippur. When he sprinkles blood on the altar and speaks the sacred name of God, a name too holy for any other lips, it is not just a place of worship, it is the nation's axis. The temple is the visible sign of the invisible God. It is where heaven and earth are said to touch. Children are taught that God lives there, that the smoke rises to heaven carrying their prayers, that the city cannot fall so long as the temple stands. To speak against the temple is to speak against God. To say it will fall is to declare the unthinkable, to say the center cannot hold. To the south, near the royal palace, the upper city climbs with terraced homes, tiled courtyards, and guarded reservoirs where the priests, officials, and scribes live. Below, in the lower city and along the slopes of the Irupian Valley, narrow streets, shared wells, clay ovens, barefoot children, and market shouts echoing off stone. Above the crowd, in a modest stone room near the northern wall, a man leans over a clay shelf, adjusting the wick on an oil lamp. Not yet gray, but already weathered, not yet hunted, but already watched, his name is Jeremiah ben Helkiah. He is in his mid-40s now, strong of frame, though thinner than he should be. His hair falls to his shoulders, black with a few streaks of silver. His beard is trimmed by hand. His voice, when he speaks, carries weight without volume, a voice shaped by solitude, a voice that knows how to wait. He wears a rough wool tunic cinched by a fraying leather belt. His sandals are worn through at the heel. His hands are ink-stained, not from copying scrolls, but from clutching them during flight. He no longer lives in Anatoth, his hometown, 2 miles to the north. He fled it years ago. Too many threats, too many stones thrown at his door. He now rents the low room carved into the hillside near the temple's northern ridge. No family lives with him. He never took a wife. God told him not to. You will not marry. You will not feast. You will not mourn. Your life will be a sign. So he lives alone. The room is sparse, a stool, a clay oil lamp, a mat of reeds rolled against one wall. He heats a crust of bread over a small fire, eats it without hurry. He has no appointments, no students, only words and warnings. Outside, the city swells with early winter activity. The reign of King Jehoiakim is in full force. The king's taxes bleed the merchants. Forced labor builds a second palace. Foreign gods find their way into the temple courts. Jeremiah waits, because today Baruch is coming. Baruch, the younger man, the steady one, clean hands, always with 2 extra reed pens and a spare ink jar. The only person Jeremiah lets near him. Baruch ben Uriah, a scribe, a man with priestly blood and courtly handwriting. Baruch does not live with Jeremiah. His family has standing, some say noble, others say priestly. His brother Seraiah is part of the king's court. Baruch stayed in one of the homes nestled close to the palace grounds. Sandstone walls, terraced rooftops. Water jars kept cool in underground niches. That was Jerusalem. The year was 605 BC. The city prepared to fast, and beneath the surface, something stirred. A scroll was being prepared, a message sharpened like flint. But to understand the voice behind it, we need to go back to a fig tree, to a courtyard, to a young man with ink on his hands and a question in his chest. This is where it began. Part 4, The Scribe and the Prophet, Jerusalem, October 606 BC. Baruch first met Jeremiah in the temple court. Baruch was just 20, tall for his age, lean. His face was smooth. He wore his hair tied back with a cord of red wool like many of the scribal students from the upper quarters. He came from a known family. His father, Uriah, had connections, and his brother, Sariah, had already begun work in the king's court as a staff officer. Baruch had options, safe ones. That day in the courtyard, he was looking for a place to sit and read under the fig trees. Jeremiah was pacing, alone, dust on his feet. His wool tunic hadn't been washed in days. He looked more like a herdsman than a prophet. His voice was low at first, muttering to himself. Then it rose, sharp and sudden, cutting across the courtyard like a wind through dry reeds. "The house you trust," he said, pointing at the temple itself, "has become a den of robbers." A few people turned. One priest muttered under his breath. 2 guards shifted uneasily by the gate. Baruch didn't move. He didn't speak, but he didn't leave either. Baruch had heard the name Jeremiah before. Everyone had. The prophet from Anatoth, a priestly town 2 miles northeast of the city. Years earlier, Jeremiah had walked the steps of the temple with authority. He came from a priestly line himself, son of Hilkiah. But he never completed the training, never served at the altar, never wore the ephod, the sacred vest that marked a true temple priest. Instead, one day, without permission, he stood at the temple gate and began to speak. He told them the temple would not save them, that Babylon would breach the gates, that their leaders, priests and princes alike, were blind men leading the blind. He said judgment was coming. He was arrested more than once, flogged, humiliated. Once they threw him into a dried-up cistern, ankle-deep in mud and silence, hoping he'd just sink into the ground. He came back, again and again, preaching ruin in the shadow of the sanctuary. Some called him a traitor, others mad. But Baruch saw something different. He saw a man who had survived the hatred of kings and priests and never changed his message. Baruch was young, but not naive. He had been raised among the scribes, educated in law and liturgy. His family had a view of the palace from their rooftop. His brother worked in the king's court. He knew what it meant to be seen in the wrong company. But that day, when he first saw Jeremiah near the water gate, he didn't walk away. Baruch stayed in the shade of a fig tree, watched, listened. He came back the next day, and the next. The words stuck. They scraped. "This house will be torn down. This city will burn. Your kings will not save you." Baruch had copied royal decrees, speeches polished by palace scribes. He'd penned odes to princes who'd never touched a sword. He knew what propaganda sounded like: refined, ornamental, flattering. This wasn't that. This was something else. Baruch heard something under the words. Not just fury, not just doom. There was grief in it, and honesty, and clarity like cold water. Jeremiah spoke, and not in riddles. He named names, cited laws. He quoted Isaiah, Hosea, and yes, Micah. That's what caught Baruch off guard. Jeremiah didn't posture. He remembered, quoted Micah's cry against Jerusalem. Zion will be plowed like a field. Jerusalem will become a heap of ruins. He said it like he knew the place Micah stood, like he'd walked the same stones. And when the guards grabbed him, Jeremiah didn't flinch. He kept preaching with blood on his lip. That's what stayed with him. Weeks passed before they spoke. Baruch approached carefully, late one afternoon, when the courtyard had thinned. He said nothing of the messages, nothing of the temple, just, "I've been reading the lament of Micah." Jeremiah crouched by the stone wall, didn't look up. He just said, "Do you believe him?" Baruch hesitated. "I don't know yet." Now Jeremiah looked at him. Then, "Read it again. And when your hand is steady, come back." That was the beginning. Some days later, beneath a stone arch near the temple outer court, Jeremiah was seated, knees drawn up. A bloodied bandage was wrapped over one hand. Baruch stood nearby, hesitant. "Baruch, I heard what you said today about the elders who killed the innocent, about how the prophets were murdered in the square." Jeremiah, without looking up. "Not much has changed." Baruch, you quoted Micah. Jeremiah, he was right. Baruch, you remembered it exactly, every word, no scroll in front of you. Jeremiah, what's written on bone doesn't fade, only what's written in ink. Baruch, my family says you're a danger, that you provoke the priests, that you want Babylon to win. Jeremiah, finally looking at him, I don't want Babylon to win. I want the people to wake up before it's too late. Baruch, you said the temple will fall. Jeremiah, yes. Baruch, but you live in its shadow. Jeremiah, I don't serve the shadow. I serve the light that left it. Baruch, you said the temple will fall. Jeremiah, yes. Baruch, but you live in its shadow. Jeremiah, I don't serve the shadow. I serve the light that left it. Baruch, you don't write any of this down. Jeremiah, shaking his head, what good would it do? The ones who need to read it, burn it. Baruch, then I'll write it. Jeremiah studies him. No smile, just long, slow silence. You know what that means? Baruch, it means your words will survive you. Jeremiah, it means they'll come for you instead of me. Baruch, nodding. I've written for liars long enough. Jeremiah, come at dawn, bring ink. An invitation, an assignment, an open silence between them where the truth could settle. Baruch returned with ink and parchment. It was never formalized, never public, but within months Baruch had become Jeremiah's voice on the page. That was part 4, the scribe and the prophet, a beginning forged not in thunder, but in slow conviction. Baruch didn't join Jeremiah in a moment of glory. He stepped into shadow, one word, one page, one warning at a time. But now the writing begins. Next, part 5. The scroll is prepared. A hidden room, a final draft, and the first real consequence of putting truth to parchment. Baruch is no longer a witness. He's a participant. And the scroll, it's no longer his to keep. Baruch doesn't knock at the gate, not anymore. He waits for the change in the watch, when the temple guards are distracted and the streets shift with new foot traffic. He carries no reed pens, no ink jar in plain view, just a wool wrap draped over his shoulder, hiding the scroll case tucked inside. His path from the upper city to Jeremiah's quarters is never the same twice. Some mornings he slips behind the baker's stall near the fish gate. Other times he joins a line of water carriers bound for the Gihon Spring, blending in with the daily churn of workers. But his family knows, not in detail, but enough. His father Neriah said it quietly one evening under the vines. Don't tie yourself to that man. He's under judgment. He wasn't angry, just tired. You'll lose your name, your standing, everything I've worked to build. Baruch didn't respond. He only nodded, gently folded his scrolls, and left before the lamps were lit. But it was Seraiah, his older brother, who pushed harder. They met in an alley behind the palace granary. Baruch had just returned from Jeremiah's hillside room, scrolls still hidden beneath his cloak. Seraiah stood with arms folded, jaw tight. He wore the robes of a royal official, clean lines, fresh linen, a seal cord at his wrist. He didn't shout. You're walking a road you don't understand. Baruch kept his voice low. You think I haven't thought this through? Seraiah stepped closer, lowered his tone. I'm not questioning your loyalty. I know your heart. But you're aligning yourself with a man the court considers a traitor. The temple elite call him unclean. Do you know what that makes you? Baruch said nothing. You're not a prophet, Baruch. You're a scribe. You're supposed to observe, not ignite. Copy, not confront. Baruch finally met his eyes. Maybe we were taught to copy too much. Seraiah's face softened, just for a moment. Then his voice returned to steel. If you're arrested, I won't be able to intervene. You're on your own now. He turned and walked away, the white hem of his robe brushing the dusty stone. Baruch didn't follow, didn't speak, but that night he wrapped his writing tools tighter than usual and left his family's home for good. He hadn't expected their support, but the wound of their distance, that stayed with him. Still, every morning he returned to Jeremiah, not because of rebellion, not out of spite, because the words stayed with him, like smoke in the lungs, like sand in the teeth, and because deep down he knew something Seraiah could never admit out loud. The scroll he carried might just be the last true thing spoken in Jerusalem. Jeremiah's stone cell just beyond the northern wall of the temple has no marker, no symbol, no door, just a curtain of reeds swaying in the dusty breeze, From the outside, it looks abandoned, forgotten, which is how Jeremiah likes it. But it's not forgotten, it's watched. Baruch steps inside quickly. No greetings in the open air, no lingering at the threshold. Inside, only the rustle of parchment, the glow of a lamp, and two men who know that silence is their only protection. They say little at first. Baruch unwraps the scroll case from beneath the folds of his robe, lays the parchment gently on the clay shelf. Jeremiah, already seated cross-legged on the mat, looks up. His eyes are tired, but alert, always alert. Jeremiah, softly. They've increased the guard at the east gate. Baruch. And I heard your name again in the market. They both know what that means. Time is running short. Jeremiah doesn't live like the other prophets, not anymore. He used to have a following, students, crowds. He once preached in the temple courtyard. But after he called out the priests and told the king he'd be buried like a donkey, they beat him, threw him in a cistern. The cistern wasn't just a water tank, it became a prison. It was empty of water but full of mud, and he sank into it. It was dark, cold, isolating, meant to silence and humiliate him. He could have died there if not pulled out by a sympathetic court official. Later, he was locked in chains by the city gate, exposed to the jeering crowds. Now he keeps to the margins, and the margins keep him honest. His home, if you can call it that, is a cell carved into the soft limestone of the hillside. The priest would say it's below his station, but Jeremiah would tell you that's the point. His God doesn't speak from palaces. He whispers in caves, shouts from ruins. They review the scroll line by line. Baruch's handwriting is precise, like water poured onto dry ground. Today is not like the others. They both know it. Because today, Baruch will read the scroll aloud at the temple built by Solomon, in public. Jeremiah. They will not listen, but you must read it anyway. Baruch. I will read every word, even the ones that break them. They say nothing else for a long moment. Jeremiah rolls up the scroll, ties it with a strip of worn linen, places his hand on Baruch's shoulder. Because this is not just a reading, not just a message. This is a confrontation, delivered in the most sacred place in the land. The Temple of Jerusalem isn't just a place of worship. It's the center of identity, power, and law. It's where priests chant the psalms at dawn and sacrifice lambs at noon. It's where officials and commoners both come to settle disputes, offer grain, and seek God's favor. Baruch knows this. He knows the priests will be there, the same ones Jeremiah called liars and frauds. He knows the scribes who answer to the palace will be listening. He knows the king's informants walk the temple grounds disguised. Scrolls aren't read aloud casually. Not here, not now. To unroll a scroll in the temple court and speak Jeremiah's words is to declare war on the king, the clergy, and the complacency of an entire city. And Baruch, he's not protected. He's not anonymous. He's not some wild-eyed outsider shouting from a street corner. He's one of them, a scribe from a noble family, brother to a royal official. He has everything to lose. He knows what happened the last time Jeremiah preached here. They beat him, locked him in stocks by the city gate, threw him into a cistern to die. And when he survived, they banned him from the temple entirely. Jeremiah, with his eyes fixed on Baruch. "You'll stand in the upper court, just outside the new gate, near the chamber of Gemariah." Baruch nods. He already knows the spot. Jeremiah continues, "It's the fast day. The people will be there, all of them, the elders, the officials, even the priests. Fast days draw crowds, pilgrims, scribes, elders in white linen. Fasting is more than hunger. It's a national pause, a ritual of repentance, a moment when ears might be open." Baruch will enter the temple courtyard with the scroll hidden in his wrap. He'll wait for the midday hush when prayers are over and people are still. Then he'll untie the linen strip, unroll the parchment, and speak, loudly, clearly, word by word. Baruch, talking to himself more than Jeremiah. "They'll recognize my voice." Jeremiah, "Let them." Baruch knows this could lead to questioning, or worse. There are guards stationed near the inner court, scribes loyal to the king, temple officials who remember the last time Jeremiah spoke there, how the crowd turned violent, how only one priest stood up to defend him. But Jeremiah is barred from the temple now. He's no longer allowed through the gates. Baruch is his voice, his proxy. The words are Jeremiah's. The mouth is Baruch's. But for now, Baruch slips the scroll into the fold of his wrap. Jeremiah watches him go. That was part 5. The scroll is prepared. Baruch made his choice. The words are written. Now they must be spoken. Next, part 6. The message goes to the throne. Jerusalem, December 10, 605 BC. The scroll leaves the cave and enters the temple. Baruch stepped back into the alley. The light had changed. Sharper now, high sun. The scent of smoke and roasted meat drifted down from the temple courts. He kept the scroll tucked tight under his arm, wrapped in linen, shielded from dust, sun, and watchful eyes. He didn't walk fast. Fast draws attention. He moved like a man with errands, focused, forgettable, the kind you pass without remembering. The path from Jeremiah's cell to the temple's outer court was barely half a mile, but it was layered like walking through the layers of power itself. First the vendors selling birds for sacrifice, then the guards 2 by 2, spears upright. Then came the scholars robed and careful, and beyond them the priests in white linen, their hands slick with oil and blood. Baruch had seen them all before. He had grown up among them. But today he wasn't a scribe. Not exactly. He was something else. A man carrying words no one wanted to hear. He passed under the Huldah gate. The stones were warm to touch. Ascent into the Temple Mount always felt like a reckoning. Today, it felt like a dare. In the outer court, a group had already gathered. Pilgrims, farmers, widows with baskets of doves. A crowd, but not a mob. Baruch cleared his throat once. Then he began. No preamble, no introduction. Just the words, steady and sharp. This is what the Lord says. Babylon will destroy Jerusalem. If you do not listen to me and follow my law, if you do not listen to the words of my servants, the prophets, then I will make this house like Shiloh, and this city an object of cursing among all the nations of the earth. The murmuring started immediately. Shiloh, the place where the tabernacle once stood, now desolate, abandoned. To say the temple would become like Shiloh? That was blasphemy. He kept reading. Babylon will destroy Jerusalem. They have turned their backs to me and not their faces. Though I taught them again and again, they would not listen. Therefore, I will bring upon them disaster, the sword, the famine, the plague, until this city is empty. Gasping now, some stepped back, others stepped forward. No one was neutral. The priest muttered a curse, loud enough to be heard. May your tongue cleave to the roof of your mouth, and may your hand wither like the fig tree out of season. Baruch didn't flinch. Someone else shouted, "Who sent you?" Baruch didn't respond. He just kept reading, because Jeremiah had told him, "They will not listen, but you must read it anyway." So he did, every line, even the ones that broke them, even the ones that might break him. When the scroll was finished, he rolled it tight, bound it with the same worn strip of linen, and stepped down from the stone platform. No applause, no praise, just silence. And then the movement, the tightening of robes, the calling for guards, because words once spoken don't go back in the scroll. And Baruch had just spoken them all. Baruch left the temple quietly, quickly. The scroll never left his hands. He didn't go back to Jeremiah, not yet, too risky. Instead, he waited. A back room in the house of Gumaria, a quiet ally inside the royal court. One of the few who had still listened. That's where they took the scroll, and that's where it began to move, from scribe to scribe, court official to court official, passed hand to hand like a hot coal. No one wanted to hold it for long. News traveled fast, too fast. By nightfall, word had reached the palace. King Jehoiakim was furious. He didn't wait. He issued an arrest warrant for both Jeremiah and Baruch, but by then they were gone, vanished. No one knew where, not even the few who supported them. No rooftop sightings, no quiet visits, no word. And so the scroll, the message, was left to survive on its own. It moved through the corridors of power without its prophet or scribe. Hand to hand, whisper to whisper, a parchment ghost haunting the court. And eventually it reached the king, Jehoiakim, son of Josiah. He wore foreign robes, built himself a palace with forced labor, taxed the people into famine. He didn't want prophets. He wanted silence. It was winter. Outside, the hills were cold and bare. Inside, the royal chamber smelled of cedar and smoke. The fire pit in the king's quarters burned low, coals glowing red. Jehoiakim didn't bother to stand. He didn't even read it himself. He called for Yehudi, one of his scribes, to read it aloud. The king sat back in his carved chair, elbows on the armrests, fingers drumming. Yehudi began. The words, Jeremiah's words, filled the room. Judgments, warnings, promises of exile, destruction for the house of David, fire for the gates of the city. The king didn't flinch. Every 3 or 4 columns, Jehoiakim reached forward, took a knife, and cut. A slice through parchment, clean, final. Then he dropped the piece into the fire, again and again, column by column, strip by strip. The scroll burned as it was read, Some of the court officials looked away. Others whispered. But no one stopped him. No one tore their robes. No one wept. The king watched the fire swallow the words, not with fear, but with control. A message written in agony, reduced to ash. It was more than rejection. It was erasure. But fire doesn't erase truth. The message had already been heard on the temple steps, in the courts, in the alleys. People had whispered it on their way home. Mothers had asked their sons what they heard. And somewhere, Baruch had already started writing again, because Jeremiah had said, "Take another scroll and write all the words again." And Baruch had nodded, without hesitation. Because once you've said it aloud, once you've felt the words crack the air, you can't unsay them. That was part 6. The message goes to the throne. The scroll was read. The warning was burned. But the fire didn't end the story. Now, part 7. The Babylon breach. Jerusalem. July 18, 586 BC. The walls are breaking. It begins with a sound, not the blast of a horn, not the cry of alarm, but a crack, dull and heavy, echoing off the stone walls like a snapping of bone. The wall has broken. As first light bled over the hills, a groan of stone split the silence. Near the Genoth gate, the walls gave way. Babylonian siege engines have punched through centuries of pride, and now the end is not coming, it's here. In the narrow quarters just beyond the temple's northern wall, Jeremiah is already awake. He hasn't slept. Not really. He rarely does now. Baruch is there too. He didn't leave last night. He couldn't. They'd heard the grinding of stones, felt the tremors, the air thick with the stench of fire, of panic, of something far older, fear. Baruch. It's happening, isn't it? Jeremiah. Yes. Baruch moves the reed curtain aside. He peers into the dawn, not for light, but for signs. Plumes of smoke rise from the lower city. Screams twist through the alleys like wind. No soldiers are coming for them, not yet. The king's guards have fled. The priests are holed up in the temple courts. There is no order now, only collapse. They sit in silence, 2 men who've said everything there is to say. They spoke it months ago, in the ink that now darkens the scrolls in Jeremiah's clay jar. In the court of the temple where Baruch had once stood and read Jeremiah's words aloud to a people who would not listen. They spoke it when the king took that scroll, sliced it column by column with a scribe's knife, and fed it to the fire pit. The words burned, but the fire did not end them. Jeremiah. I told them this city would burn. Baruch. And now it does. Outside, the cries sharpen. The Babylonians are not like Judah's kings. They don't mock prophets, they silence them. No trials, no scroll burnings, just blood and chains. Baruch reaches for his satchel, instinctively. The scrolls are inside, the new ones. He still carries them, not out of hope, out of duty. They don't run. There's nowhere to run. Jerusalem is surrounded. Every gate is flame or spear. Instead, they do what they've always done. They sit together. One speaks, the other listens. Then they pray. Not for deliverance. That prayer was spent long ago. They pray for the remnant, the ones who might live, the ones who might remember. Jerusalem fell. After a siege that lasted nearly 2 years, Babylonian forces breached the northern wall. The temple, Solomon's temple, was set ablaze, its gold stripped, its walls pulled down. The city was looted, homes collapsed. Fire consumed what generations had built. King Zedekiah fled in the night but was captured near Jericho. Before his eyes, the Babylonians executed his sons. Then they put out his eyes and dragged him in chains to Babylon. Thousands were killed. Thousands more were taken into exile. Artisans, soldiers, scribes, officials. The elite of Judah marched east into a foreign empire. Only the poorest remained behind to tend the land in the shadow of what once was. Jeremiah lived to see it all. He was neither killed nor taken to Babylon. The Babylonians spared him, perhaps because he had spoken of their coming long before it happened. He remained for a time among the ruins, mourning what could not be rebuilt. Later, against his will, he was taken by a group of Judean survivors who fled south to Egypt, fearing Babylonian reprisal after a failed revolt. Jeremiah died there in exile, far from Jerusalem, far from the temple, still warning, still weeping. And Baruch, he went with him. The scribe who once walked the halls of power became a fugitive alongside the prophet he chose to follow. We don't know how or where Baruch died. Tradition says he stayed by Jeremiah's side until the end, carrying his words long after the voice that spoke them had gone silent. What happened to the scroll? The first one, read aloud by Baruch in the temple, was sliced apart by King Jehoiakim and burned. But the words didn't die with the fire. Jeremiah dictated again, Baruch wrote again, and more was added. The second scroll became the foundation of the book of Jeremiah. The version we have today, preserved in the Old Testament, isn't a perfect replica, but the voice is the same. The words survived war, exile, kings, fire. And Baruch, he disappears from the biblical record, but tradition holds he went into exile with Jeremiah. Some say he fled to Egypt. Others believe he continued writing, preserving prophecies long after the temple fell. Jeremiah's voice was nearly silenced by kings, by priests, by mud and flames. But through a scribe's hand, his warnings endured, his grief endured, his hope endured. A scroll, once lost to fire, now sits at the heart of Scripture. In every Bible, in every language, the words of a prophet, written in exile, still read today. That's it for the epilogue of Choosing the Unknown. Thanks for spending time with us. If you've got a story you think we should tell, reach out and share a few details. It just might end up in a future episode. Next week, we begin a new series, If Only, stories where history pivots on a moment, or you can't help but wonder, what if? Our first story is about Tsutomu Yamaguchi, the only person who survived both atomic bombings. He was in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, when the first bomb fell. The next day, he returned home to Nagasaki. And on August 9, as he was telling his supervisor about Hiroshima, the second bomb detonated. 2 cities, 2 blasts, one man who walked away from both. Get Some is written, produced, and hosted by me, Paul Johnson. Music and sound design by Epidemic Sound. Find photos, show notes, and past episodes at getsomepodcast.com or on our YouTube channel. If you're enjoying this series, leave a review or share it with a friend. It helps others find these stories. Thanks for listening. And remember, today is the best day of your life. Now, go get some.